Piping Fish in 1984, which is also a very good novel. George Orwell. I developed an interest in cichlids, started keeping Central Americans, and then we got interested in the Tanganyikans. And then, no, you didn't say Tanganyikans. You went straight for Victoria? Well, you said you moved on to Victoria. I'm looking at your bio here.
Okay. I think I maybe.
And then the lakes around Victoria.
Abbreviated version, but yes.
And then the Crater Lakes of Cameroon. That's getting, I don't even know what cichlids are there. And so he's been focused on cichlids that are rarely in the hobby. And so we've got uncommon cichlids from Africa. Normally, Michael is part of the New England Cichlid Association, and they hosted the ACA convention in 2015 and 2019. We hosted in 2021. When are we going to have it again?
What, the OCA?
Yeah.
They just had it down in Texas.
No, the ACA. Well, they just had it there. When do we get it?
The ACA is in Texas. The OCA is the week before Thanksgiving.
When do we get it again?
OCA, we don't ever get it.
Not the OCA, the ACA.
Yeah.
I want the Ohio Cichlid Association here in St. Louis. All right.
Mike loves that event so much he wants to host it.
Whenever they ask us to do it again.
So, enough of me. Please welcome Michael Liu with a big warm welcome to St. Louis.
Everything.
Stick that in your pocket. And you want to clip that a little away from where you've got the other one clipped.
Okay.
You might want that one closer to your mouth because of how it picks things up.
Pardon me while I figured this out.
There's no rush. They're just happy to be done with me.
Whew, I feel so fancy. Hello. Does this work? Can you hear me? All right, cool. Thanks for having me here. Before I start, I've got a couple things going against me. I'm exhausted. I'm full. I've been fed so well here, I feel like I need a nap. And I haven't given a talk in many months, so let's hope that between all that, I still can remain coherent. But again, thanks for having me. It's great to be out here. This is my first time in St. Louis.
I'm sorry.
No need to be sorry there. Okay, so I started off with cichlids. I should mention I'm a landscape architect by profession. I've been a landscape architect my entire professional career, which I hope will end next year. Because, you know, you do one thing that long, you get sick of it, except for fish. We all love fish. I started off with cichlids. You know, I had the typical community cichlid tank with one Oscar, one Jack Dempsey, a convict, blah, blah, blah. But it really hooked. I just, you know, that was early on, back in the late 80s, and I've loved cichlids ever since. I've tried cichlids from almost everywhere that they can be found. And about 10, 12 years ago, I heard talks by Dr. Loisel and everybody, talking about Cares fish and fish that are endangered, and we should do our part and try to keep at least one species for the long term. So I said, okay, I got some extra tanks. Let me get into this. I'll look for an endangered fish. And at that time, it just turned out I also happened to see some talks about Victorian cichlids. And the one cichlid from Lake Victoria that got me interested in Vicks, I actually brought a bag of fry over there, donate to your mini auction. But this talk is not about Victoria or the Rift Lakes, where cichlids are common throughout the hobby. We don't really need to, well, I can't say that. They're common, you can get them, you can get information about them. What interested me was, why can't we get some other fish that aren't in the hobby? And so some of us, banded together and we started finding out that we could get Lake Victoria cichlids. There's other places where cichlids can be found in Africa that we didn't know too much about. So that's what my talk is about. Most of these cichlids are species that New England Cichlid Association has managed to import either from Africa directly, sources in Africa, or from some of our fellow fish keepers in Europe who have traveled there. So I hope you find this interesting. Do we have a lot of cichlid keepers out there? Okay, I recognize some of you. I've seen you at some of the conventions. So anyway, the first part of the... Whoops, did that wrong. Where's that pointer? Uh-oh. There's the pointer, but where's the image? Well, anyway, I'm trying to go back.
Left or down?
Oh, left.
Yeah, left.
The first part of the talk, now I lost. Let's just go on.
It's okay. It's all right.
I need to thank these people. I've stolen their pictures to use. They've given me permission, so I just need to make that public announcement. Whoops. Oh man. There we go. Oh, now I got it. That's the pointer. Okay. The first part of the talk is about some cichlids from the Cameroon crater lakes. If you didn't know, there's a whole series of old volcanoes in the southern part of Cameroon. There's some really interesting cichlids that are found there. I'm going to talk a bit about those. This is the longest portion of the program. So in case you get bored, I'm sorry, but I still hope you find it interesting enough. So Cameroon here, off the southern coast, there's a bunch of islands, and these are all volcanic islands. The volcanoes stretch inland into the southern part of Cameroon, and there are some ancient collapsed volcanoes there, which, you know, hold water, and there's some interesting cichlids that are found there. The biggest lake, volcanic lake, is Lake Burambiambo. There's a lot of cichlids that have been in the hobby but have not stayed in the hobby. I guess they're just not interesting enough for, you know, the average fish keeper, but for somebody like me who geeks out on these like weird fish from different places that are colorless, mind you, it's kind of interesting to me. Lake Berman is another pretty well-known crater lake. Burambi Bakato is one that that's been more recently explored. And Lake Ijakum is not a volcano, but a more of like a giant kettle hole. It's in the flatlands. And then this whole area kind of drains into the Cross River, which goes from Cameroon into Nigeria and then back out to the sea. And you know, I've kept a couple tilapia type fish from there. So these pictures, I think, are from one of our, if you might know Adrian Indemauer. He's a Swiss ichthyologist, and he's spoken in the US many times. Very good speaker. He makes the technical stuff very understandable. But anyway, Lake Burambiambo is the largest crater lake. It's about almost 2 square miles of surface area. And these lakes are generally circular in shape. They're collapsed volcanoes. But there's 11 endemic cichlids found there. They're listed here. I'm not going to bother reading them because I'll talk about them, you know, in the next couple slides. But these fish are also endangered because of, you know, human activity around the lake. There's agricultural practices that occur. So there's always, you know, there's pollutants that can be, and chemicals that can be, you know, that leach into the lake, et cetera. Plus the fact that these lakes are isolated. Nothing really goes out or in. But if any introductions of invasive species get in there, it could wreck the whole ecosystem very easily because there's such a small body of water. Now, in this slide, I hope I got this right, but Lake Ijakum, in terms of its square area being 2 square miles, might look something like this compared to downtown St. Louis. It's basically, I think 2 square miles is about a 6,000 foot diameter circle. So something like that. You can see how small the lake actually is. Some pictures, you know, that I found interesting. This is Adrian, in case you don't know him. He likes to get muddy, which is my kind of guy, you know. You get out there, you wade into the water, you see what you can find, you come out. Sometimes there's probably leeches on your legs and stuff, but hey, you know, it's all part of the fun and games, right? Anyway, Adrian's collected here. He's helped export some fishes and stuff, and these are just, some nice images of the lake. Here's a fisherman with some catch in the bottom of a canoe. Again, people doing their thing, doing laundry in the lake. And then an interesting underwater shot. I thought this could be very helpful in terms of how, it could help you in how you might want to decorate your aquarium. Here are a couple of the cichlids that are found there, which are probably the least colorful, maybe least interesting. And I happened to see this fish in, where's Mike? Mike Huber, in Mike Huber's tank this afternoon. I didn't realize this fish was really still in this country. So they're still around. And yeah, okay, and people have had them, but they're not the most exciting, colorful fish. So I think you keep them for maybe a couple of years, and then you try to pass them on. And that's what happens to these poor fish. They get in the hobby, but they kind of get dispersed, and people stop breeding them, and they try to get rid of them, basically, because they want to keep something else. I'm guilty of that too. We all are. We only have so many tanks unless you're somebody that's got like 1,000 or 2,000 tanks, and you can dedicate like 50 tanks to Lake Tanganyika and 50 tanks to Lake Central America, et cetera, et cetera. Most people can't do that. But these are interesting fish. This is Cerotherodon caroli. Its cousins Cerotherodon linnelli, Cerotherodon steinbachii, Cerotherodon lohbergeri. Of all these fish, this one is one that I want in the hobby, but has, to my knowledge, we've had some fish that we thought was this one. This is a sifter. A sifter, you like whales sift. They've got big jaws and mouths so that they can intake this huge amount of krill, for instance, and sift through it. So there's a bunch of cichlids, not just from this lake, but from every body of water. There's different groups of cichlids that feed differently. So this is a sifter. He's got a very proportionately large head for its body. And that's how you can kind of tell what it's, perhaps tell what it's feeding on. This fish I first saw, Conia eisentraudi, I first saw in the hobby maybe 18 years ago. It was around. There were catches, some imports to this country, with some of these fish. And of course, the most recent time that I saw this fish was maybe 4 years ago or so. So it might still be around. It's not the most exciting thing, but it was one of the first fish from Barambiambo that was imported into the US. And then this is its cousin, Conia decum. It's a very deep water fish. It's not I've seen other photos where this fish gets a little bit more red coloring, and it's kind of attractive, but from what I've heard, this fish is very hard to catch because it's deep water. It is seasonal. It will come into the shallows to spawn, but it's not like anybody's out there looking for it to make money by catching them and exporting them. So we might not ever see it, but I know that there's several people in this country that are hoping that they can find some of these and somehow get them into this country and give them a try. So I think all these four have definitely been in the hobby. This one, perhaps. It's never been confirmed. There's another group of fish, or another genus, Stomatopea. These are pretty good representations. What's the most common in the hobby is, I think the most attractive, is Stomatopea pindu. It's a black fish, and it stays silvery gray most of the time. When it's spawning, it looks like this. And they spawn in typical cichlid fashion. They'll dance in a sand pit in the bottom. The male tries to attract the female into the pit, and deposit eggs and so forth. Stomatopea mariae is the largest. It's been in the hobby a couple of times, and it probably still exists. It's a fish that people get. It's easy to spawn. It produces hundreds of babies, and you can't get rid of them. We've all heard that about a lot of cichlids before. I've actually never kept it because I'm more interested in trying to maintain this fish, and I'd like to get this one back. I've had it a couple of times, and it's one of those where, I gave it up to try to make room for other species, and I'm like, I wish I never gave it up. So I'm actually looking for this fish to keep in my fish room again. Stomatopea mongo is an interesting one too. It was also reported to be a deep water species, so it was hard to get, from the lake, and also if you're catching them in deep water, more difficult to get up to the surface. Do you guys know Lisa Hober with Super Cichlids? Anybody do business with Lisa in Delaware? Okay, she runs a giant fish store about the size of this space in here. I've driven down there a couple times because she's a good friend. She used to drive up to New England to come to our meetings in Connecticut. And when we first imported this fish, they arrived, I can't remember when they arrived because I wasn't involved in the pickup, but they made it up to one of our members' houses in New Haven, Connecticut, which is on the south shore of Connecticut. Lisa lives 5 hours away. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. She got a call that the fish were in and she could come and pick them up the next day. She said, "No, I want to come now." So she drove 5.5 hours from 1 a.m. to whatever, picked them up at 6 a.m. and got them home, and as far as I know, she still has them. That was, whoops. Again, I did it. Go back. Wrong buttons. But as far as I know, she still is maintaining this fish. She has a display tank in her store, and this is a photo I took in her store of that fish. Now, they do become much darker. They almost get as dark as the pindu when they're spawning. These fish are reported to be predatory or paleophages, meaning they eat fry of other fish. But they're actually pretty mellow, except this one is larger, so it tends to be a little bit more boisterous and aggressive. But these are easy to keep, and they're very interesting. They basically spawn in typical haplochromine fashion, similar to other Malawi or Tanganyikans, but these are mouth brooders. I was told by Dr. Loisel that very close to the lake, like half a mile away, you can find these, what are these called? Spotted jewel cichlids, which are very aggressive, if anybody's ever kept these. They're very aggressive, they spawn in large numbers. If these fish ever got into Brombian somehow, the whole ecosystem might be very adversely affected and collapse. So again, that was part of one of the hazards or reasons why these fish are, if not already on the CARES list, should be placed there because they're threatened all the time by those kind of human interventions. These are probably the two most interesting and, to me, attractive fish that are from Brombian. This is Mayaka mayaka. It's an interesting fish. Even males and subdominant males and females are basically silver. They're very nondescript. When you get a dominant male, they look like this, and the back parts of their bodies turn black. The head is silver. It's a very interesting contrast. And these two are notoriously difficult to breed, so it's a challenge. I think in this country, there's only 4 or 5 people that have bred this fish, and part of that is probably the availability. You can't normally get a group of 6 or 8 or 10 of these. We have arranged imports, and most recently as 2024. But all of these species, which was the target species, died. And we were sent all the other fish that the collector had, which nobody really wanted, unfortunately. We were like, we need to get this fish, in the hobby. And it just didn't happen. You still have it, Pat?
The one to the bottom.
Have you bred them?
Not yet.
Ooh, good.
I think I have at least.
Okay, good luck.
200 male tank.
Wow. And what's the number?
I think I have 600.
Okay, all right. The only person I know, well, pungu is a cool fish, and I like it because it's yellow. I like yellow cichlids. Don't ask me why, it's just my thing. These fish are sponge feeders. They have very, very strong lips. I put my finger up against them and rubbed it. They have these raised, these kind of like lots of little sharp teeth in the front, and the lips just lock on. to rocks and wood and stuff. They eat in the lake sponges, freshwater sponges grow on a lot of the timber and wood that falls into the lake, and that's their main diet. And of course, they're going to ingest some plant matter, probably some insect matter and stuff. So they had, they're omnivorous, but their primary source of food is sponges. In the aquarium, I've never had them look like this. They never get this yellow, and I was kind of disappointed, but they're still a cool fish. These are some that I had, I can't even remember, back in, it was definitely, I think it was around 2016, 17. And I did have a spawn. I was lucky because I caught the female and she spit all her eggs in the nest. I was like, thank goodness. I put them in a breeder box because they were wiggling already, and they died one by one. So I don't know what I did wrong. I didn't think I did anything wrong, but they obviously, were weak. And then the adults never spawned again. And I ended up passing them on. Other people have kept this fish and tried it. The only person that I know that has had good success spawning it multiple times is a guy named Jim Valenzuela, who used to live in Louisiana, and I think he moved. But he had them outdoors in like a covered breezeway or something, and I don't know what that was. Maybe they got a lot of natural food or insect larvae or something like that. I don't know what kicked it off, but he had success in spotting them.
Mine from Chris Binns.
From Quinn's fins?
Chris Binns.
Really? Okay.
He has them in his shop.
Wow. Okay. I wonder where he got them. Well, periodically, you never know what the wholesalers can offer. But again, this fish is one that hasn't been in the hobby for a long time, to my knowledge, and it's something worth keeping if you're up for a challenge and try to figure out what's the kickstart that's going to get these guys to spawn regularly. They may be seasonal spawners too. It might have a lot to do with the weather and barometric pressure and that type of thing. They don't seem like they come from very deep waters, but I've heard that a lot of these fish, as others, come into the shallows to spawn, so there might have to be some kind of transition period for them. Maybe it's a change environment. We were talking about this idea of at dinner tonight, where some fish respond when there's a heavy rain and they're basically flushed downstream or something. Now, I know this doesn't happen in a lake, but there can still be an influx of fresh water that changes the chemistry of the lake. If there's a heavy rain, for instance. Let's see if this works. So this is this is what I call the Barrambian bow tank that I had back in 2006, and you can see it's pretty heavily stocked. Most of the species are from Barrambian bow, but I had there's a Pangu, there's a Pindu, this is a Cerotherodon lobergeri, I think. There's a Mayaka. I think there was Cerotherodon caroli in here. Yeah, there's one over there that swam off the screen. And then I had my favorite Synodontus angelicus in there too. But it was rather heavily stocked. I don't use live plants generally, but I had plastic plants in there, a bunch of stacks of rocks and things. And the fish, none of these fish ever attacked each other. There was never any damage on these fish, which is another thing that I liked. And I've observed other people that have kept fish. This was a 125-gallon tank, by the way. I've seen other people set up 75-gallon tanks and 90-gallon tanks with probably twice the stocking level that I had in this tank. And the fish looked great. They just don't seem to bother each other. So that was another very attracting factor of these Barrambian bowfish, that they don't rip each other apart and chase each other endlessly until one of them just wears out. Here's another video of Mayaka Mayaka. This is a male doing its thing on top of a kind of a rock that had a flat surface. The female wasn't particularly interested. And he was dancing his heart out, but I never had these guys spawn. But you can see he's ready and willing and able, and the female's kind of like, what are you trying to prove? You know, he's kind of following her and chasing her around and chasing other fish away. But these guys never spawn for me. But I think it's a pretty, you know, for a blackfish. A lot of times people don't like blackfish, but you know, this one had the silver head, which I thought was very nice. Okay, let's move on. As long as you watch this, nothing's going to happen. So we'll just go on. This is Lisa's in Lisa's store. Yep. Okay. This is her Mongo tank. So I think she had a dozen of these fish, and you can see there's kind of silvery, a little bit gray and bluish color in them, depending on the mood and lighting. You know, they have an interesting shape, is what I can say. It's a different shape than a lot of cichlids that you find, you know, in the hobby. They're, you know, torpedo shape, but they're definitely, you know, a cares fish. Obviously, as I mentioned, they're endangered from human activity and possible contamination and so forth. But you can see they're pretty calm. You know, they don't chase each other around. I think even when they're spawning, they do their thing and they leave each other alone. So that's another kind of bonus for these fish, if you like oddballs, is that these guys are pretty, you know, pretty mellow. I believe this was just a 6-foot tank also, and I think the only thing she had in there was these fish, and there might have been a couple plecos or something. All right, so Lake Berman. Now, Lake Berman's another one of these crater lakes, and it's only a quarter of a square mile. So it's like basically 1/10 the size of Brombian. I mean, you could almost, if whoever's got a really good arm, could probably throw a stone and almost get to the other side. It's crazy small, you know, and here we have 9 endemic species. A lot of these have been in the hobby. Probably the most famous one or well-known is Coptodon snyderi. It used to be called Tilapia snyderi. They reclassified all these fish and moved them to this kind of new genus, Coptodon, many years ago. But snyderi was in the hobby. It's an attractive little fish. The only thing about this lake is all the fish look the same. They have the very same coloring. If you got 4 different species and brought them home and put them in a tank, I can guarantee you won't be able to tell them apart. They're that similar. You have to look at their teeth, see what they feed on. Some of them might have a slightly larger jaw or a slightly different profile, but I've looked at some of these fish side by side, and it's very difficult to tell. And you'll see why here. So where's snyderi? This is snyderi that I had, I don't know, this is probably from 2012-ish, an old picture that I had. Now, Coptodon snyderi, if you read any literature about this fish, it says they only get to 3 inches. Several people have reported that their snyderi have grown to 7, even 8 inches for males. So obviously, you know, a lot of hobbyists, we overfeed our fish. We take better care of them. You know, we're doing water changes and treating them right, giving them good food, so they can grow larger. So in the lake or in their environment, you know, they're battling and competing with other fish, and so they might only get to 3 or 4 inches. But if you look at this fish, and you look at this fish, and you look at this fish, and you look at this fish, they're really similar. If you put them in especially juveniles, if you put them all together or in separate containers side by side, you know, you wouldn't really know what you were looking at. One of them that I really wanted was this one. Whoops, I did it again. Coptodon flava, meaning yellow. It's another yellow cichlid. I'm like, yay, give me all the yellow cichlids you can find. I love them. But what's interesting about this photo too is you can see some of these sponges growing on this log. But this fish is yellow. When we got them home, lots of people have had this species. Nobody's fish ever looked this yellow that I've seen. So if you can grow sponges maybe offer them that kind of diet, you might get better coloring. I don't know if anybody's going to be growing freshwater sponges in their aquarium, except you.
Not much, but have you tried giving them like angelfish diet from saltwater?
I have not. I have not.
Because those foods are full of sponge.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. I'm going to have to contact the person that had the best looking fish that I saw of Captain Flava was Mike Helford in Chicago. Had these for a while, and some of his photos showed them that they were pretty yellow, but not that intense. I don't know. I'll have to find out what he fed them. Maybe.
Do the Gudarosa get? Do they get about the same size?
Gudarosa, yeah, they're probably on average. I would say these fish are all in the 5 to 6 for males. Females are generally smaller, 2/3 the size. Now this one was supposedly in the hobby, Captaram Bacchusorium, and I'm going, oh, that one's easy to identify. Look at the lips. When I looked at them head on, side on, every angle. It looked just like that. And I'm like, are you sure this is Bacchusorium? And we were told, oh yeah, what's the Czechoslovakian guy's name? I forget now. But supposedly he has that book, West African Cichlids. I forget the name of the title too. I guess I should put a photo of the book in here to remind me. But supposedly they were positively ID'd in this country by that fellow. And when we got some from, when we found a hobbyist that had them, and some were mailed to us, we grew them out. They never looked like this to me. I just, so I'm like, I can't tell. This fish supposedly made it to the U.S., but I don't know who ended up with them because I think only a small number came. Kim Peterson is a Danish cichlid keeper. He specializes in Victorians. He goes on a lot of expeditions almost annually to Africa, but he's made several trips to Victoria and was able to bring fish back, as part of a scientific expedition. He's helped out several times down there with sampling and documenting their catches and stuff, and he's brought back a lot of undescribed species. But he's been to this lake apparently and brought back some of Gudarosa, which I think is a very attractive fish, at least in this photo. I don't know if he enhanced this or not. I doubt it. I know Kim. He's been to this country several times. He stayed at my house. He's a really fantastic guy. The Danes are probably one of the nicest people on this planet. And they speak better English than we do. But this is one of his fish. It's absolutely gorgeous. Lake Ejochum is the kettle hole lake, but again, this is a very, very small lake, 1/10 the size of Barrambi and Bow. So this lake has never really officially been explored until the mid-2010s, somewhere in there. We arranged some imports with Oliver Lucanus, with Below Water from Montreal. He's basically working a lot in South America, but he had some people, some collectors that he knew in Africa, arrange for them to go to this lake and figure out what was there and find out, catch some fish, send them back to Oliver in Canada, and then we managed to import some fish from Oliver.
The yellow one there.
Yep, that's right. And that one has been very popular in the hobby, although it breeds like convicts, so that kind of decreases its popularity for some reason. But yeah, 7 endemic species. We got Captaron decardi. Oh, no, I'm thinking of, okay, Captaron ejochum, fusiform. There's supposedly a big one and a little one. I think they've split them up somehow, but nothing's official because nobody's really doing any real official research here or writing any papers about this stuff. Captaron nigrans, and then 2 Ceratherodon, Ceratherodon lamprechtyi and Ceratherodon naueri. This photo is of, I believe this is Captaron decardi. It's a very yellow fish, which was obviously, appealing to me. This is a kind of a poster that Oliver made of the species that were there. This is pretty good representation, although it doesn't, they're not to scale. Where is it? Ceratherodon naueri is the smallest one of these fish, cichlids. It probably only grows to be about 3.5, 4 inches max. Pretty easy to accommodate in an aquarium. And then these are the other ones. These fish all made it to this country except this one. and this one, the namesake of the lake. I've kept Negrins, Deckardii, Naurii, I got Lamprechthy, and Mike Helford in Chicago had, I think there were only 3 or 4 of these that made it, and he kept them for a couple of years and they never spawned. He lost them. I went out to Chicago visiting, and he asked, do you guys have any of these? I go, no, you got them all, you know. And he said, well, it's taking up too much room. It was this big by that time. And I said, well, if you can find some way to ship it back to me, we'll keep it. And he did. He shipped it to us. I don't think I've ever received like a 10-inch fish. I've shipped big fish, but 10 inches. And these guys are like, they're beefy fish when they get big. They've got like, I don't know how to say it, like, what's the word? They have a wide cross section. They're really big. I think that's one of the larger cichlid in the lake. But here's a couple photos of Negrins that I kept. Now this fish, for some reason, I found it very appealing. This was in a 40-gallon breeder tank where I grew 6 of them out, and I eventually ended up with a pair. They spawned with the other adults in the tank, but after that I removed the other fish and just kept the pair in. But when they spawned, they produced lots of fry. And the coloring changed, the banding became darker, and the color contrasting, etc. But what I found interesting was that I did an experiment because nobody wanted these fry anymore. Only a couple people wanted them, and what was I going to do with 200 fry? So I just left them in the tank. I figured the parents would eat them, and then when they wanted to spawn again. But they didn't. They let the fry grow to, this has got to be, 2 inches, some of them are 2 inches plus. And I thought that was remarkable because every cichlid that I've ever kept, when the parents want to spawn again, eventually they will kill the fry because of the limited space. And it'll happen obviously more dramatically in a smaller tank than in a larger tank, but this was in a 40-gallon breeder, and I was just kind of amazed. So I took this photo, and I don't even remember what I did with all these. I think I managed to unload maybe 24 of them, and then the rest of them, I can't remember what I did to them. Maybe it was so traumatic that I put it out of my mind because I don't usually like to, kill fish, but maybe I had to. These guys are too big to feed to my other cichlids. Let's see, whoops. This is Coptodon deckardii. What I thought was the most attractive fish, cichlid, because of the nice yellow coloring, the dual colored, caudal fin, the red eye. This is a male. This is a female. All these species of Coptodon have these red dots on the belly, which is kind of nice, especially on the females. But these guys get a little bit larger than the Negrins, but they were very difficult to spawn. I think I had them for 2 years or more before I got a successful spawn. And I only had 2 successful spawns. This is a female with fry, but you can see after they spawn and they're in brood care, coloring and pattern totally changes. What I found out with a lot of Coptodon is during the breeding period or fry rearing and care period, the striping just goes crazy. It turns into these Y patterns and zigzags and stuff. You can kind of see it in here, but it's not as dramatic, as this. And I believe these are the same fish. I don't know. It's a trait that seems to be in many Coptodon that I've seen and kept. And I kind of I like that pattern. It's kind of, to me it looks cool. So when they were breeding, I thought, not only do they undergo this dramatic color transformation, but it's also a pattern transformation. Cerotherodon naurii is a cool little cichlid. It can get pretty golden yellow. These are images from Paul Loisel. A long time ago, when I was first getting to know Paul, he actually contacted me because I found out he was interested in yellow fish. And at the time, I had a lot of Amatalania nanolutea, you know, the little gold Central American cichlid, and he wanted some. And I was like, wow, remarkable that he caught. How did he even know? We didn't really know each other. I've seen him at talks. I've talked to him, you know, at his programs, but we never socialized. But he called me up and said, hey, I want some of those fish. And he goes, you might have an interest in a yellowfish that I have. And I go, oh. And he didn't know that I had yellowfish, but he mentioned that. And I said, you have, what is it? I was very curious. So we swapped fish. And after that, we, you know, became closer. I found out that we are both cat people. We both relish in exotic ethnic foods. We love going out to eat. Every time we got together, we always had to find a Thai restaurant, an Indian restaurant. Oh, he missed that one. We went to an Afghan restaurant somewhere, and yeah, that's right. He didn't make it to that convention. But we went out several times for you know, ethnic foods whenever we got together. So it was always a lot of fun seeing Paul. But this is a very, very easy fish to keep. What I thought was interesting was like when they get into color, this photo doesn't show it, but their foreheads became a sky blue, which was really attractive with that yellow coloring. And again, these are small fish. They're very easy to maintain, like a 20 or a 29. I would say a 29 would be better. But you can probably maintain a pair in a 20-gallon tank and be successful with them.
You only get 3 or so inches?
Yeah, females probably 3, males might hit 4. I never had one that was over 4 inches. This fish right here, whoops, this fish right here, I'm guessing was probably, yeah, this fish I'd say was 4 inches. And I had this fish in that same 125-gallon tank that the Bromby and bow tank that I had broken it down and changed it. But this fish was in there with much larger tilapia types, and it did fine. It held its own. You know, it was perfectly capable of you know, going out swimming and competing with the other fish for food, etc. So a nice little fish to have in there, a mixed tank. You could probably mix this with other types of fish. You could probably even keep it with like Rift Lake cichlids and Central Americans and so forth. It's very hardy, as with, you know, most tilapians are. Okay. And then I got a chance to keep this fish. This is a fish that came in the Oliver import, but he kept them. He was not able to breed them. And at some 2 years later, he offered them to New England Cichlid Association. And I said, sure, I'll try them. I took them, and they were still pretty small when I got them. This fish is probably 3 inches, a juvenile. That's another juvenile. When they grew up, they started looking like this. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, I didn't realize they got so yellow, but that was, for me, that was just another, you know, added benefit. And they got to be, this fish was probably 6 inches here. These are different fish, but they were both, I believe these were both males, about 6 inches. Oops, yeah, I guess that's all the photos. I never got to spawn these. I passed them on to a postdoc in North Carolina who moved to like UC Santa Clara or something like that out in California, and I've lost touch with this guy. But he was doing research on the crater lakes in Cameroon, so he was trying to collect all these, you know, Cameroonian fish. So I said, hey, that's the perfect guy to take these, and then I never heard from him again. I'm gonna have to try to track him down. I've lost his contact, and you know, it's been years now, and I'm just kind of curious if he's still studying, you know, the Cameroonian cichlids. Not that I want the fish back again, but I'm just kind of curious what he's up to these days. So Lake Bromby Bakato is another small lake, and this one's even smaller. It's only, you know, almost 1/10 of a square mile. So it's half the size of Berman and Ijakum, another very small lake. There's only like 5 cichlid species found there that's reported. Captaran cote, which is this nice fish, which has been in the hobby, and everybody that gets it manages to spawn it, and then they want to get rid of it because it just produces too many babies. But I think it's an attractive fish, and it almost gets a purplish coloring, you know, down here mixed in with the black. The photo doesn't show it, but I've seen some photos. I've had it. I've never seen the purple, but again, it might be a matter of diet, etc. Other fish that are found in there, this one's been in the hobby, Chromidotilapia guntheri. There's a couple different varieties of that fish. You know, kind of looks like this. This is one of those fish, I think, where the females are more attractive than the males. They have some more patterning in the dorsal fins and so forth, where the males are kind of more solid color. So that's a reverse thing going on there. And I believe with that fish, I've never spawned it, but I believe it's the male that does most of the brood care with Chromidotilapia. So that's another interesting thing with cichlids and why a lot of people keep them to breed because of their behaviors. But we also found in that lake Hemichromis fasciatus, which is again this, you know, the jewel cichlid, one of these very mean, aggressive fish that can tend to dominate a fish tank if you kept it in a community situation. Pelmetolapia mariae, which has been in the hobby before. I don't have a good picture of it. This is, I took this from some stock photo from the web, but we've seen this fish in the hobby. They, you know, they're very kind of cute looking when they're 3, 4, 5 inches, but they're capable of getting larger. And in my opinion, they're better looking when they're small. They tend to have better coloring, but the coloring dissipates a little bit more when they will. Yeah, like they'll breed at like 2 or 3 inches, won't they? Yeah. Okay. And this fish is out in the canals in Florida and stuff. So if you ever wanted it, you could probably get a friend that goes down there and bring some back for you. It's been in the hobby many times, but I haven't seen it available for 10, 12 years at least. The other one is Cerotherodon galileus, which I don't have a photo of, but it's a pretty typical large tilapian.
They call that the Jesus fish or something?
Yes, yes. And I believe it's a food fish, you know, where in its native habitat. People are obviously going to fish for it because it's a larger growing tilapian that, you know, gets like, you know, 10, 12 inches. So a lot more protein there.
And there are some of the cote up on the table.
Oh, good. You got them out here. Once they're here forever. These are the cote that I had in a 40-gallon breeder. Now I started out, I grew 6 out. You know, they bred in that little cichlid cave with rocks stacked up around it. That was their territory. I knew they were up to something because I didn't see the female for many days. But in the background, you can see some of the other fish, you know, kind of keeping their distance. And then the dominant male here is kind of patrolling the area, typical of cichlid behavior, where the male patrols the area and the female kind of stays around and guards the clutch of eggs. And then obviously when the fry become free swimming, it's harder for them to keep them. And then, you know, they either herd the fry around and protect them or they kill their tank mates to protect the fry. I didn't let that happen. In this case, I took the other fish out. I grew the fry out a little bit, you know, distributed them around. You know, they made it all over the place in New England. They've made it across the country. Several people have had it. I'm sure it's still available as you have it here. I don't know how many of you might have tried it. It's a nice cichlid. I thought they stayed pretty small, similar to the Nauerite, because these guys were only, whoops, here we go again. This female was probably 3 inches, maybe a little less. And the male was, you know, 4-ish inches plus maybe. People started reporting that their fish were getting 8 inches, you know, and like, oh, you got to take this off my hands, it's too big. And I go, you know, it's like, I didn't really want this fish again. It was nice to try, but, you know, I had other, you know, interests. But again, people are reporting 7, 8-inch males, and I thought, wow, okay, they, you know, maybe that's how they take care of themselves in the lake, you know, because they can get to be a pretty big size and, you know, become an intimidating force against the Hemichromis fasciatus. So maybe that's how they survive. The Cross River, couple of interesting fish. This is a pretty typical tilapian Coptodon species, Mamthe. Mamthe is the name of a village on the Cross River, so I guess this fish was found near that village. But there's a lot of Coptodon, a lot of Ceratherodon that look like this. The difference between Coptodon and Ceratherodon, or Oreochromis, is Ceratherodon are found in West Africa. Oreochromis and a lot of Coptodon are found in both, but most Oreochromis are found in East Africa. You might not be able to tell the difference, and a lot of them are food fish. So we're not going to see a lot of live specimens necessarily, but a lot of them do look like this in that they get to be a big size. The males tend to have a little bit more color, brightness to them. When they're young, I thought that again, when they're young, their pattern is attractive. They have that typical tilapian spot in the dorsal fin. When they got bigger, this male doesn't show the spot. But again, here is a female. Oh wait a minute, is that the male? Anyway, this is an egg plaque. So this, these fish are like the African version of the convict. So you have to beware if you ever keep these. And some of them can get pretty large. So you ultimately will need a larger tank to keep them happy. But an interesting fish down here found in the Cross River is Atia, Atia anguti. This is an Oliver Lucanus photo of some adults there. These are a small cichlid, maybe 4 to 5 inches max. I tried them once, and I had good luck keeping them. This pair laid eggs, and only like 6 or 8 you can see on the top of that rock. They only did that once for me, and they never did it again. And the eggs were probably eaten by them or other fish. This was a community setting. And I I wish I kept them and put them in a species-only tank. I've heard of people able to spawn this fish. It's not very difficult in aquarium conditions. But this is another one that you're rarely going to find in the hobby. Now, somebody's probably going to tell me that they have them here in St. Louis. No? Yes? No? Has anybody ever seen it? Okay. What's interesting about this fish is they've done DNA analysis on this fish, and this fish is found in West Africa in a river. This fish is most closely related to Boulangochromis microlepis. Is that right? Microlepis? In Lake Tanganyika. One of the largest cichlid that we know of, which is gets to be almost 4 feet long or something like that. If you know that fish, in Lake Tanganyika, it's a kind of a bottom dweller. They're long. They look nothing like this. They're elongated. They're very large. And I think they're basically sand dwellers. They spawn in the sand. Supposedly, they spawn once and then they die soon after. After the fry are free swimming. So it's interesting that they're related. But this just goes to show that perhaps at one time, some bodies of water in Africa were connected eons ago, and when they were separated somehow, this fish became a riverine fish where that other fish remained in a lake situation, and they developed or evolved the way they did. But by DNA, they're cousins. So it's just completely doesn't make sense, but that's that's biology. This is a pair of the Coptodon mumphae that I had. So again, you can see the number of babies that they have. Feeders, right? You got to use them for feeders. No store's going to want this fish, but that I thought was the male in breeding color. And I go, whoa, he's gorgeous. I really like that. I don't care if it's a silverfish. It's got pizzazz. So I had to put a divider in there because there were other fish on that side, and this male was getting really pretty boisterous and actually damaging and ripping the fins on the other fish. So they got a divider. I probably siphoned out like 20–25% of the fry and let the other fry just get eaten in the tank. But this fish probably lasted in the hobby 5 years or so. It just, nobody had any interest in it. It's a big silver fish. And we've all seen boring silver fish before. So that concludes Cameroon. Now we're going to hop over to the other side of Africa where, we know of the soda lakes, right? Soda cichlids. Everybody heard of soda cichlids? A lot of you have. Go. Okay. So the soda cichlids are found in these lakes that basically straddle the Kenyan and Tanganyika border. This is Lake Victoria, my primary interest right now. But off to the south here, this is Mount Kilimanjaro Park. So you have this situation where you've got a snow-capped mountain, and then down here in the plains, it's hot, very hot, arid. You've got these lakes that are just basically salt. And they're very shallow, and they can dry up, if there's no rain. There's not much feeding these lowland lakes. They kind of look like this. Lake Natron is one of the most famous, but here you've got your penguins. Oops, I missed that. Back. Okay, you've got your penguins. We all know sorry. Yeah, penguins are pink, right? That's interesting, penguins. Okay, flamingos, and we know why they're pink, right? Because they're feeding on the krill and little fish in the lake that are affected by the cyanobacteria. So these lakes are kind of like toxic. They're highly alkaline. Is that right? Yeah. Which way are they? Yeah, acidic. They have very high pH. The temperatures are very hot. And actually, they found that the little fish that are found there live in these streams that feed the lakes. And a lot of them, they swim from the streams into the lake to feed and then go back into the fresh water. So that's pretty interesting behavior. Can you replicate that in an aquarium? I don't know. Anybody want to try? I think that's pretty cool. But you can breed these fish, and a lot of people have in an aquarium setup. But these photos kind of are interesting because they show the redness of the water due to the cyanobacteria. I think the landscape is just gorgeous. The contrast with the mountains and the plains there in the foreground. It's very picturesque. Lake Natron has Alcalapia, by the way, which recently these fish have been moved to, what is it? I got to update this. They've been moved to, is it Ceratharodon? But anyway, they've been moved to another known established genus. The most common that we've seen in the hobby is Alcalapia alcalica. These are a pair that Peter George had. We didn't know much about them, but he kept them for a while successfully. They like to spawn on top of a tall rock with a flat surface. So if you can find build a mound of some sort or whatever, or find a rock from the garden that has a flat surface, and if you can prop it up, they like to spawn on top. Kind of interesting. Other fish that are found there, this one is a Paul Loisel photo. I don't know if Paul Loisel knows how to do Photoshop or whatever, but I don't know if these are real colors or if they're enhanced somehow. But all of Paul's photos that he's ever sent me are, very bright. I've never seen an Alcalapia endolani look like this. They do show red and blue in there, but I've never seen one that has this intensity of color. And then the other one that's interesting is this one, is Alcalapia latilabris. It's more strictly an algae eater, and you can see that in these fleshy downturned mouth with the big lips, so they can scrape and latch onto rocks where there's algae and feed on that. The Danakil Desert is another area off here in a very, very hot region of Africa. And this orange area indicates that area of this lowland desert. But it looks like this. These sulfur ponds, etc. The first time I saw one of these was like in, Yellowstone. You see it there. But what I thought was interesting was like, God, who could live here? What do people do? How can they take it? But they actually have tours, where you can go to these places. I don't know about you. I'm so sick of the humidity. I could scream. I would never last here, I don't think.
It's miserable.
Yeah. So there's, lava-filled crevasses. There's sinkholes. So here are some people mining salt out of the desert. So I guess, okay. You can make a life for yourself somehow.
The local people are referred to as the gateway to hell.
Is it? Is that right? I believe it. Yeah. And this is the Danakilia. I don't know if it's been described in terms of a species. They're calling it Danakilia shukarai in the hobby. Very interesting, pretty attractive fish. When males get larger, they do develop, the hump on the head, and they can become quite bulbous. Okay, anybody still keeping them? I have soft water. I shouldn't be keeping African haplochromine fish, but it's working. A lot of the, excuse me? Oh, okay, Debbie and Tom. So these fish like it very alkaline and hard water. This is a little video when I tried them and I lost them one by one. My water's too soft. I can keep the pH up, but the water's too soft. So these guys never stop moving. It's like a roller coaster. They don't rest, it seems. And they just go up and down, back and forth. They seem like they're chasing each other or following each other in some kind of game. But again, I didn't know if I'd have luck with them, but since I was keeping fish, from high pH alkaline waters, I thought I'd give it a try, but it wasn't successful, and I just said, I better not waste my money and keep trying, this fish and killing them. But other people, like out here where you've got limestone and stuff affecting your pH and water chemistry, I think you'd have more success out here, out in Florida, down in Florida, et cetera, with this fish. And you don't have to keep them in those extreme temperatures. You don't have to try to replicate like 95-degree water and pH of 9 plus or whatever. You can keep them in regular like Tanganyikan type water. I mean, these guys have adapted to an extreme level, of water chemistry. That doesn't mean you have to keep them at that range. They'll do okay in lesser water, but it still has to be somewhat hard and high pH. Lake Mweru in Zambia, and some of the Zambian rivers, is a recent exploration, mostly done by some of Oliver's folks in Africa. So this is Lake Victoria, this is Lake Tanganyika, and this is Lake Malawi down here. This is an area surrounded kind of in a bowl, if you will, of this part of Africa, but Lake Mweru is here. It does drain and eventually flows, the water goes into Lake Tanganyika. Some of the Zambian rivers, where they're finding some neat riverine type species, flow into Lake Mweru and subsequently into Tanganyika. Another political map, but again, we see this is the bottom part of Tanganyika. Here's Mweru. It flows over eastward, and then there's rivers that they've explored. Kind of interesting fish here because the fish there are not well documented at all, and it's kind of a mess because they find that there's lots of species there, and they kind of, nobody's really done any formal research, so we don't know how to group them or where to place them, or if they should be split into other genera. But some of what you find there are Coptodon, Oreochromis, Orthochromis, which is a riverine species, Pseudocrenolabris, which is a very large genus, Sargochromis, which is basically large predatory type cichlids. Same with Serranochromis. You've got some tilapia, and you've got Tylochromis, which I thought was a riverine fish. But they're finding it in this lake as well. So there's probably dozens of species of Tylochromis that are unknown to science. But here's a couple of fish that I've kept over on the right-hand side. I thought this, again, obviously was a pretty nice looking fish. At the time, there were many of these that came in. These guys were a pair. They spawned under this slab. And I gave them away because other people had them. And I had other fish to worry about or concentrate on. And I figured they'd be around for a while. I was wrong. Other people spawned them easily, but for some reason, they just didn't stick in the hobby. I know there's still some out there. I don't know how inbred they are because what I'm seeing now are fish, or what I've seen are pale yellow fish that have more like this kind of coloring. And I'm like, how did I get my fish to look so good? But so again, I don't know if these are actually Tilapia sparmani or a similar species. Again, nobody's done DNA work here to figure out if there's multiple parallel families of fish, etc., that can be grouped together. We just don't know. Pseudocrenolabris is something that's found all over Africa from west to east, basically from the mid part of Africa down all the way into South Africa. There are many different species. We don't know, again, how they're related or if they're subspecies or whatever. But there's something in the lake that was brought out that people have had easy success with, which I thought was kind of a cool bulldog-looking fish. Pseudocrenolabris, they called Oliver gave it the name weed picker, and you might see yellow weed picker sometimes. But okay, are they vegetarians or what? I don't know. They're very easy to keep. They're omnivorous. They're very tough fish, like a lot of these cichlids are. They're pretty easy to keep, but they tend to be a little bit on the aggressive side, but they don't get that large. 4 inches. I think the largest male I don't think the largest male I've ever seen was larger than 5 inches. Not the most exciting fish. Some different Pseudocrenolabris that I've seen from other rivers have different markings on their body. Like there's one that's very attractive, like the scales have this kind of X pattern in them, which I thought was kind of neat. So different species from different collection locales. But this one was found in the lake. And then this one over here on the left is Ceranochromis. Now I had no interest in this because I know that Ceranochromis are predatory. However, this one was found that seems to be the smallest Ceranochromis. If you look in the literature, Ceranochromis are foot long plus fish. There's other species I think that are even larger. This one tops out at about 7-ish inches. And I thought, it's not bad looking, but still, if it was yellow, it would have made it to my room. I've never tried it, but other people have had success with it. It's also not that aggressive. It kind of looks like a mean fish, right? A little bit, like maybe it's going to eat all the babies. I kind of like the egg patterns that they show in the anal fin. Interesting fish, not really for me, but maybe for others. And this was an image I found about the, some of the lines, the complexes, if you will, of some of these fish that they're, how they're grouping these in Lake Mura. I'm not going to go through this because I'm not a biologist or an ichthyologist. I read this stuff, but I can't quote it back to you in any rational way. But we have this orthochromine complex, Pseudocrenolabris, Sargochromis, Cerith, and a couple different complexes of Ceranochromis. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to sort this all out. Like I kind of question, this is there's a lot of representatives here. Are these all the same or subspecies or whatever? They're very similar, right? But are they actually different species? Who knows? We don't know yet. And this is the example of this one. This is in the hobby. Some people have had success with it. I've kept it, but I've never spawned it successfully. But it's reported to be, something called Pyrocaudalis, or that's what they're giving it the name, but we don't know if it really is Pyrocaudalis. Pyrocaudalis means fire tail. And you can, you can obviously see that, coloration, but, you've got this image from Oliver Lucanus, this image from Salzburg Lab in Switzerland. This is from one of my friends, Keith Kalinowski, and this is one that I kept. Are these all the same fish, or did we happen to receive, different species? I couldn't tell you. To me, morphologically, some of them even look different. Like, this one has a higher body, than these. This is more streamlined and elongated. So who's to know? But some representatives of this line of fish are in the U.S. hobby. Not many. For some reason, we haven't had success breeding it here. We actually, the last time Kim Peterson was here, which was probably almost 4 years ago, we gave him some adults, and he took them back to Denmark, and he spawned them within 6 weeks, I think. He spread them around to the point where nobody wanted them anymore in Europe. And he actually sold some, well, I don't know if he sold them or gave them to a pet store. Shortly after that, we were arranging an import from some Europeans, and Kim said, well, I can get this fish if you want it, but you're going to have to pay the pet store. So we did. We got, whatever. We ordered these back and got them back into this country because we didn't know of anybody really successfully breeding it. There were a couple reports of spawns, but we didn't see distribution of these fish anywhere. So we thought, okay, let's get them back here and do it again. I took a group. My group dwindled from like 7 to 5 to 4. I gave mine to Peter George. He now has them. I don't know if he said I know he's had a female holding, but they did the same thing to me. The female held for like 4 to 5 days, and then she wasn't holding anymore. So I don't know if it's the same female or the only female that is producing eggs and doing the same thing over and over again. I couldn't figure it out. They don't seem to be fussy about water. It's an attractive fish. They're very mellow. You can keep multiple males in a group, and they seem to be fine. They just, they're just out looking for food most of the time. They interact pretty well with other fish. I've kept them with Victorians, and they seem to do well, even though they don't look like they belong, with the haplochromine flock from Lake Victoria. They're more, to me, they're more reminiscent of a South American cichlid. They're pretty attractive, and smaller fish, maybe topping out at 4.5 to 5 inches for males. Well, here's a little video. I should have put this in earlier of the Sparmani that I had. But again, kind of attractive, very intense yellow. They get that black on the underbelly and fins when they're spawning and protecting fry. This is in a different location, from the photo that I showed. But again, they seem to spawn underneath this kind of like, man-made cave that I produced with some rocks, clearing out some of the gravel. I believe that they laid the eggs on the underside, of the leaning rock. But a good little fish, like 3 inches, very easy to keep in an aquarium, if we can get some back. And then some of the Zambian rivers, the Kalangwishi River is someplace where they found a lot of these different Orthochromis species. Now, what we've had in the hobby is Orthochromis stormzy, which has been in the hobby a couple of times. I don't think anybody's really looked for other Orthochromis until recently, last 10 years or so. But so these are some of the species that they found. This one, they called it rainbow, but they officially assigned it the name Orthochromis kalangwishiensis. Try to say that kind of fast. And you can see why they called it rainbow. It's displaying yellows, reds, some orange, blues in there, and purple. Very pretty little fish. I've only seen this fish once. One guy, our treasurer from New England Cichlid Association, Tom Koba, had some, and I think he only had like 3 fish. He wanted to breed this, but he only ended up with 3. He got a mixed bag of orthochromis, and I think there were only 3 of these. So he was never successful. He said he thought they were spawning, but unfortunately, he never put much effort into catching the females and trying to, gather or collect the fry instead of letting the female kind of like release them in the tank and getting eaten. He had a very densely stocked tank with other cichlid species, lots of rocks and plants and plastic plants and stuff, and he's like, it's such a hassle. It's going to be such a hassle collecting them. I go, it's worth it. Just take everything out of the tank. It takes 15 minutes, Don't you have 15 minutes? But, he's not a breeder like some of the other people that I know. So, unfortunately, we never were able to get any offspring from this beautiful little fish. This other one down here was named after Adrian Indermauer. Pretty little, very attractive there. And this one seems to have a little higher body, so I don't know, you wouldn't immediately think it was a riverine species. But it's got to me it's got fantastic markings. I don't know if this is stress coloration, but it looks pretty cool with the dark bars and the yellow color and that little red, the red edging on the top of the dorsal fin. Plus it's got this red edge of the tail on the caudal too. Pretty cool fish. I've not had the chance to try many of these. They're just not available in this country. I don't even think they're widespread in Europe either. For some reason, it's just like, I'm not really sure if there's a lack of interest, but I know there's a couple of people in this country that would love to get a hold of some of these and try them out, including myself. Another fish that's kind of interesting in another river called the Lufubu River. On the top is something called, what was called Telmatochromis species Lufubu. This has been, oh God, really got to update this. It was recently assigned a species name, and I can't think of it right now because I'm just too tired. But it's related. We've seen Telmatochromis in Lake Tanganyika. Now this one's, not the most colorful, but it's got this interesting orange stripe across the top. We had a European import just this past June, 2025, and these were sent to this country by the Europeans. I've got 6 of them in a tank in my fish room, but they belong to somebody else. And I was hoping that person would forget about them. So they're going to end up in somebody's tank in New York State. But I'm not saying anything. I'm going to let him contact me. I'd like to give these guys a try. At one point, Lisa Hober had a couple specimens in her store, and the largest one was 6+ inches. And I thought, ooh, okay, they're bigger than I thought. But since it's an unusual, rare fish in the hobby, so that's right up my bag. I got to try it. They seem pretty calm. I have them in a 10-gallon tank, holding tank, with some little Nanolutea, the Central American cichlid. I'm just kind of growing them out. They took a couple of days to come out when I put them in there, but now they're right up there with the little, Amatelania looking for food when I throw it in. And they're starting to put on some size, but the biggest one right now is only like 1.5 inches or so. But they got a ways to go. If the guy from New York gets them, I'm definitely going to keep track and make sure that he holds on to them, and hopefully he can breed them and get a colony established. The other really cool, beautiful fish from Lufubu River is this one, Lufubuchromis relictus. Now this fish, I don't know why it was described so quickly, but for some reason, they did studies on it and they got its DNA now, and they said, okay, we're going to call it this. I had this fish a couple of times. I've bred it a couple of times, and again, it's one of those that I passed on. And about 2 months later, I'm like, oh, why did I give them up? I am getting some back soon. I think somebody's bringing me some to Ohio this year, so I'm excited to get them back. I just have to make sure I have some tank space to grow them out. But I just think this color is just amazing, you know, with the rose colored and the yellow. All the males get the spots in the unpaired fins. Quite an attractive little fish. To me, when I kept them and bred them, they weren't that aggressive. There were multiple males in the group. I've had people report that the males kill each other, or the dominant male will start killing the other males. I go, okay, I didn't see that. I had success keeping multiple males, but again, we'll have to give it a try. Presumably, you know, further generations from the wild will be more accommodating in the aquarium and not be so aggressive, but I didn't find that they were that aggressive. I kept a group in a 40 breeder, and maybe the people were keeping them in a smaller tank or something, but I didn't really have any problems with them. So this is another Pseudochronolabris, a riverine species here of Pseudochronolabris, what we think is philander. Again, I think that this philander complex has a lot of different subspecies probably. But here you kind of get some idea of the patterning in the scales that's a little bit more striking, if you will. It stands out a little bit more than some of the other species. And finally, the last part of the program, I'm going to talk about the Congo River, and especially Lac Foix, which kind of went off its, people call it Lake Foix, but it's not really a lake, it's just a widening of a very short river where there's only 5 endemic cichlids. It's hard to find. When I was Googling it and stuff, I could not find the location of Foix. But over the years, there have been visits to this area, and I think that now that people have GPSed it and stuff, it's appearing in Google Earth and stuff. So you can actually go there and kind of zoom in and see the short river. This river is only 17 kilometers long, which I believe is what, 7 miles, something like that? 10 miles? 10, okay. It's a very short river. It's spring-fed. The water's crystal clear. It's absolutely gorgeous. But also, I'm going to talk first about the lower Congo River, which is an interesting habitat. I'm going to go through this really quickly. There's a lot of information on it. If you know Dr. Melanie Stiasny, she's done a lot of research. She's been basically going back here every summer to do research because it's such a fascinating environment. So this is the Congo River that comes down. It's the second longest river in the world next to the Amazon. But here, this is a backwards river. Usually a river starts in the mountains, it cascades down and it flattens out as it reaches the ocean. This river is opposite. It flows slowly all the way from the other end of Africa up, and it curves around through the Congo and comes into this area called Malebo Pool. It used to be called Stanley Pool, the British named it. But then it exits a very narrow channel down here. So you've got all this water that gets funneled down into a very narrow channel. And this channel drops. I can't remember how many meters it drops within the course before it reaches the river. But it's basically a backwards river in that it has the steepest part at the end of the river, and plus the fact that it's very narrow. So the water's going through this at an incredible velocity. There's all these undercurrents that actually do this in the river from bank to bank, and the fish cannot go from side to side. They just cannot. They basically get washed up if they try to swim through those currents. They found dead fish, on the side. If you've ever heard of the blind cichlid, that white one, Lamprologus lepus, is it lepus? Something like that. But they can't keep it alive. They found live fish on the shore, but they die shortly after because of the bends and so forth and getting pulled up. Now they found that some of the portions of this river are deeper than the oceans. So that's just an incredible environment. But parts of it look like this, and maybe some of you have seen this. Okay, all right, we're going to speed through this. Very interesting habitat. Found these online. People fishing. I never seen anything like that, so that was cool. So a lot of fish that come through here are elongated. These elongated lamprologines. You've got all these fish that are colorless that are found deep in the water that are eyeless. or we call them blind. They come from all the different, catfish, eels, all different ones. This is Dr. Stiasny with a fish on the shore. Then some of the rivers have interesting fish. These are more softwater fish. They're in the hobby. I think they're very interesting and beautiful. The prehistoric, the most interesting, that I like is, Heterochromis multidens. I'd like to try this someday, but it's like a 10-year investment, into before they want to breed. And then finally, Lac Foix. These are photos from this guy that lives in Africa, Thomas Menesi. He can travel pretty freely there, but this is a very dangerous area because there's a lot of crime, and it's basically run by gangs and stuff. So you have to be very careful if you're traveling there. More likely you're going to get kidnapped or something. But the waters are very crystal clear. You can see this really good ideas for how to decorate a large tank if you can manage this. But there's all sorts of habitats where there's heavy plant cover, sandy areas, rocky areas. To me, this is just gorgeous. And some more, heavily vegetated areas. But, this photo, I was told by Thomas that these are palm oil seeds. So there is some agriculture happening there, and, the waste is being discarded back into the river. And you can see this where it's kind of basically drowning out the native plants in the river, or smothering them. The fish that are found there are very cool. Some of you have seen this browshy, Thoracochromis browshy, and Thoracochromis calachromis are probably the most colorful. This guy is colorful. It's called the bloodthroat. It's been in the hobby before. It's not found very often anymore. Its cousin is larger and more aggressive, but it's beautiful. What we found is with these two species, the dominant male will spawn with multiple females. After he spawns, he starts killing the females. And then once the females are gone, if there's other males in the tank, they'll kill the other males. So several people have had the exact same experience, and I think the next time we ever get these, if we can, is to take that male out of the tank or take the females out, and also try to separate them and give the females a break so they can, eat and get their stamina and strength back after spawning and holding and stuff. They're mouth brooders, so they're not eating during that period. Schwetzochromis schwetzi is one that came in. We had good luck with it. Only one person ended up with 4 fish. He managed to spawn them and distribute them. I had them for a while. I thought they were more mellow, but then they started dying off. So I think the same thing happened. So I think these fish are very aggressive in that habitat. There's a lot of competition, obviously, because the river is small and narrow, and not, there's not a lot of places for the fish to spread out, if you will. But these are more recent images that I collected from 2021. Thomas went all the way upstream, and this is where the springs, there's 3 springs that feed this. It's cool water, it's crystal clear. You can see that in the middle of the river, these are the sand areas in the middle of the river and heavily vegetated on the sides. I couldn't really determine what these were at first, and I thought, okay, finally, these are areas of large sand pits in the river, if you will. Now the end of the river ends here. It flows into the Luby River, and you can see the change. It's like South America with black water and brown, brown and white water. So I always ask myself, what keeps the fish from going out into this and spreading out further? Maybe some habit. That is probably enough of a chemistry difference to keep the fish from, wandering out there, right? So I thought that was really cool. This is another interesting area. Thomas also reported that the highest density of fish that he found was in the upper part of the river and not so much down here. So, that's another kind of interesting point about this river. So I think that's basically it. Just a couple more quick images. You can see all the vegetation, lots of vallisneria, mile-long pieces of vallisneria maybe, and couple fish images, crystal clear water. It's just, to me, that's just gorgeous. You can see the fish in there, schools, foraging on the sand. And that's basically it. I just wanted to share this one slide. These are the species of Victorian cichlids that I brought for the mini auction. If you're curious about what they are, what they look like. So anyway, Gaurochromos empedemysma, recently described, but interesting in that the coloration. You don't find many blue Victorian fish. And it's the only Gaurochromos in the hobby right now. Haplochromos possidens is a late Kivu cichlid. If you like piebalds, females are always piebald. You get dark males and piebald males. Tyochromos red-tail shellers are a popular one. It's been in the hobby a long time. I've been maintaining it since 2013. And Haplochromos ferretarian, which should be placed in Isochromis, I'm told. But I've got some of these here. I've had this fish for a long time also. It's more like a sardine, like a Cyprochromis from Lake Tanganyika, and they spook easily. Sometimes if you catch them in a net, they'll spit, which makes it all the easier for us fish keepers that like to breed and collect their fry. But if you're curious, you can take a picture of it or let me know. I'll send you some photos. But there's one bag of each there.